Arc 6, Chapter 70. The earnest star within the collapsing tower, basking in Reed's decapitating slash, Natsuki Subaru's life had burned out. Quite literally, burning out had accurately been his moment of death. There were various things which he was pained by and which he needed to confirm, such as the way to cope with the mass of the shadow drawing near, or what he intended to do afterwards, and above all, somehow or other confirming a scaffold within the crumbling tower, and all those of his efforts had gotten abandoned. What alone was confirmed was that Reed's final flash had swallowed Subaru and vaporized him away. Perhaps it had not hurt, is what he thought. Of course, he did not believe it had been Reed's benevolence at all, but pain and fear not accompanying the moment of death was an unexpected occurrence for Subaru, who had died several times within a short frame of time. Yes, neither had he felt pain nor fear. Merely rage was what he held. Subaru. I will, for just how many times, continue to pile up meaningless deaths, is what he thought. Things he had taken with him, hints that would break him out of the deadlock. As long as those were present, Subaru's deaths would not be meaningless, and the deaths he was continuing to pile up would not be put to waste. That was terrible deceit. That was merely an excuse to turn his eyes away from his own powerlessness. He had died meaninglessly, powerlessly, without will, without heart, aimlessly, and he did not want to think that that was all there was to it. That is why, for not having merely died, he desired meaning in his death. If only he could have been more strong. If only he could have been more smart. If only instead of his current self, he could have been stronger, smarter, bolder. Subaru, but the only one here was merely the weak, stupid, pathetic Natsuki Subaru. Because nobody ever tried to leave that Subaru alone. That was because they were supporting his current self's wound-filled resolution. Subaru. That is why I am. That is why Natsuki Subaru is. The scene changes. Subaru. If I tell you to die, will you die? The moment he declared that, it was not as if he felt no hesitation. That was because he had been unable to anticipate what kind of a reaction his opponent would give him the moment she received that question. No, if it was merely anticipation, then he had done so. With various patterns of imagination, he had thought of what it eventually would be. If so, then the faltering he had embraced while declaring that question, for what reason did he possess that indecision? At any rate, Shala, if Master Sama told me to die, then I'll die, you know. He felt his chest ache upon Shala's indifferent response, who had a finger touching her cheek. As if he was being stabbed, to the point it would form cracks, painfully, he let out a shriek within the core of his chest. Oozily, upon the painful optical illusion, Subaru gripped to the pit of his stomach and deeply exhaled. Though he himself had voiced out those wounding words just now, he thought himself comical for feeling hurt. Looking at that Subaru's state, Shala rounded her eyes in curiosity. With no ill intent, Shala's attitude seemed as if she had been asked about the menu for today's evening meal, and she had merely responded appropriately. That reaction of hers was the second worst in the patterns he had predicted. With no pretense, selecting the option of accepting the instruction for her to abandon her life was Shala. That was no lie or humor, that was her real intention with no second thoughts. He was able to understand that by a single glance into her straightforward eyes. Subsequently having caught a glimpse into her dark self-interests or plans might have had saved Subaru's heart. However, the reality was that Subaru had not prepared for such an escape route. Whether that was compassion or mercilessness, at this stage he would not be able to even differentiate between the two, but Subaru. Is that so? Shala. Does Master Sama want me to die? If it's Master Sama's request, then I'll listen to anything, and I'm perfectly fine with it personally. But again, isn't it quite a weird timing for such a thought? Right now, it's a total fiasco inside the tower. Subaru. I know. Hearing Subaru's husky reply, Shala tilted her neck while having her finger remain on her cheek. Going along with that movement of her neck, her long braid scorpion tail swayed about. Scorpion tail. If considered, that was quite an ironic naming as well. Similar to Shala, which bestowed meaning upon the Scorpius, her name was expressed even upon her body. That was made apparent not merely through her name, but through various other aspects of hers as well. That was surely because she had no intentions of concealing it. That is why, Subaru. Shala, aren't you capable of taking the form of a large scorpion? Lacking any sluggish phraseology, Subaru frankly cut into the opponent's secret. The 5 obstacles that attack the Pleiades watchtower one of those. The existence of the jet-black Titanic scorpion. Subaru had been halfway convinced that it had been Shala. However, for Subaru, that answer he had sensed was merely his interpretation of the feeling he got from the powerful authority of unidentified nature, Cor Leonis. If he were to try and gain confirmation for that answer he had sensed, inquiring the opponent directly about it would be the fastest. Of course, if he had time to then, he may have chosen a different option as well. And if he had been unable to trust his opponent's response, then he might have been obligated to employ a different method. However, Shala kept her neck tilted at that inquiry of Subaru's. Shala, take the form of, the nuance is a bit different from that, but yup, I can. Ah, but it damages my prettiness, so I don't really like it too much. I just think that the design given to me by Mother Sama and Master Sama is the best. In spite of the question being one lacking any chain of logic, Shala readily answered with no hesitation yet again. She possessed no intentions of hiding anything. And the nature of Shala herself, it could be said that it had been established with this proof. At the same time, the Titanic scorpion which made its appearance in the tower, its true identity had been her. He had gained that confirmation now. The effect of Cor Leonis, the moment he perceived the positions of his comrades within the tower, the reason why the Titanic scorpion had been indicated in that perception, that had indeed been the trick instigating it. Shala, Master Sama, are you okay? Your face has a pretty bad color, you know. Would you like to refresh yourself with my lap pillow, arm pillow, chest pillow, hug pillow, or something like that? Subaru, don't say things which dampen my spirits. First of all, we don't have such time, you yourself said that, didn't you? Shala, it's true that it's a fiasco inside the tower, but for me, Master Sama is on the top of my priority list. Everything else can be kept for later. That's why if Master Sama slips into confusion and says he wants to be locked in a grapple with me, I'd welcome it super openly. I'm getting fired up. Subaru, don't get fired up. Get some water. Shala, just as always, geez, Master Sama. Sharpening her lips, Shala made a pouting face. His back and forth with her, along with her expression, if only these were to be taken into consideration, it could be misunderstood that the situation that had come up around Subaru and the others was seemingly one of peace. However, reality was not kind to Subaru and the others at all. It was the farthest thing from peace. Whilst Subaru and Shala leisurely conversed like this, Emilia and Ram were making efforts in order to hold off gluttony, and Beatrice had joined in with them for support. Julius was colliding with Reed equals Roy on the second layer. Echidna had grouped with Patrash, and must be evacuating to Tegeta along with Rem. And Melee was holding off the hordes of witch beasts the very best they could do to strike the 5 obstacles. However, even that was merely deceit for the sake of conversing with Shala. Because, in these loops, Natsuki Subaru was, Shala, Master Sama. Are you seriously all right? If you stare at me with such imposing eyes, I won't be able to hold back this 400-year-old weight I have experienced, you know. At Subaru's gaze staring at herself, Shala hugged her slender figure with her arms. It seemed to be the usual feign, but that was not it. She truly was in a situation where she was feeling uneasiness by Subaru's attitude. It was unlike her, no, that's wrong. Perhaps these were her true feelings. She had not felt shaken even when Subaru had told her to die. But when Subaru acted abnormally, her fragile heart had shaken up, almost astonishingly. Akin to a baby bird innocently yearning for its parents. When he had fired his first question at Shala, Subaru had thought of several possibilities. Amongst those, the worst one was that the instant she would get struck by those heartless words from Subaru, she might murder him impulsively at the very same pace. In the case that Shala's attitude till now had been mere acting, and anything and everything had been fabricated. It was not impossible. Though he had possessed no confirmation before that question, she had a track record of having changed into the form of the Titanic scorpion and murdering Subaru, Echidna, and Beatrice. Otherwise, it was highly possible that she'd had a hand in that after turning into the Titanic scorpion. In the tragedies that had come to pass in the loops, in which Subaru had been unable to find a single person alive. That is why the first question, for Subaru as well, had been a gamble. Once he said that, the instant immediately afterwards Shala had gulped down that question. It would not have been strange if Subaru's head had been sent evaporating. It had been that kind of a gamble he could now say that he had won that gamble. However, merely once is never an end to gambling. The debt Subaru had unconsciously piled up, the stakes prepared by gluttony and the Pleiades watchtower, in order to regain whatever he had lost till now. Piling up such little victories would be far too lacking. For a huge victory, it is a necessity to make a huge gamble. Henceforth, Subaru. Shala, sorry for having so many questions, but I want to ask something. From what I've heard, there are supposed to be some rules for the trials of this Pleiades watchtower, is that so? Shala. You ask that now at this timing when I'm getting all hot. Well, yes there are. I had talked about it before Master Sama crashed his head into the urinal too, though. Subaru. Tell me about them. Without hiding her sulking attitude, Shala gently positioned her fingers opposite to her chest, and she immediately swayed about her positioned fingers, whispering, Shala. First, it is forbidden to leave without completing the trials. Second, it is forbidden to violate the rules of the trials. Third, it is forbidden to disrespect the libraries. Fourth, it is forbidden to do anything which causes destruction to the tower itself. Yeah, whilst keeping her fingers folded, Shala explained with an awfully fluent tone. Of course, she was a girl proficient in speaking if she were to limit her thoughtless comments, and nothing felt odd in her explanation, which was lacking any pauses. Though nothing felt odd, there was a catch to it. That went for the serious tone of her voice, which was unlike her. At but the end of her gesture of counting with fingers, she had touched her final finger and then stopped there, that too. Subaru. The fifth one? Shala. That's not there. Master Sama, didn't you hear me? I must have said up to 4. Master Sama, can't you even count numbers now? That won't do. Numbers aren't my strong point either, but even I can count that much. Subaru. Shala. Staring, Subaru raised his voice and took a single step, shortening the distance between him and Shala. Those two had been facing each other head-on beforehand, but the distance between them now was enough that one could extend his hand and grasp onto the other one. Even that action was a gamble for Subaru. Of course, just because the distance between them was only the breadth of a single arm, just because he had shortened the distance between them to that of only a single arm, the difference in fighting power between him and her was not so small that it would change anything. Shala, Master Sama. Could it be you're toying with my heart? Not my will, but Master Sama getting closer on his will. If you want me to open my mouth, then it's that. At the same pace and with the same energy, hug me and melt me, Subaru. If your mouth really will open by that, then I'll do it. That can even be said to be a side benefit. But if what you believe is my purpose based on your intuition isn't actually my purpose, then that won't be the case, I think. Subaru. Shala, I shall ask again. What is the 5th rule of the tower? While accepting Shala's mild refusal, Subaru asked for the second time. That was an action not inching closer to her physically, but instead stepping onto her heart. Those repeated words, although perhaps bitter, were something she could not make it seem as if she did not hear them. Embracing that resolution, in front of Subaru who had clenched his fists, Shala slightly exhaled and Shala. NG, Subaru, NG! Rotating her neck right and left, Shala crossed her arms in front of her voluptuous chest, making a symbol of her discomfort. Though her behavior was childish, her eyes were far beyond seriousness. Intently staring at Subaru, who was standing at a precarious spot, Shala's eyes had been filled with heavy emotions. Those quiet, yet boundlessly deep, heavy emotions, which should be named as an appeal, were brittle and ephemeral. With unwillingness, she once again rotated her neck right and left. Shala. NG. No, I don't want to talk about it. The 5th rule? Does something like that even matter? In my and Master Sama's honeymoon, it has nothing to... Subaru. As if it has nothing to do. I am, and everyone is challenging the trials of this tower. I can't be as optimistic as to think it'll all be fine without even knowing the trial's rules. That's why, Shala. Shala. I'd rather not. Subaru. Shala. Like a disobedient child, Shala covered her ears and averted her eyes. At that attitude of Shala's, Subaru declared with a strong tone, "Subaru, you must be having your own duties in this tower. The tower's star-keeper. You must have been doing that all this time, right? I don't know if it's true or not, but for 400 years. Then Shala, it's been 4 days. Subaru, ah!" The spilled voice, as if a whisper, shortly halted Subaru's thoughts. The years Subaru was questioning, and the time frame too short to even be comparable. Surely, her statements had been lies, and the time Shala had spent in the tower had always been short. Something like that was not possible. While retaining possession of the heavy emotions in her eyes, Shala, with her lips shivering, continued. "Shala, it's been only 4 days since Master Sama has come to the tower. Within those, as Master Sama was in bed for 2 days, that makes only 2 days since Master Sama and I have met with each other, spoken to each other, have been side by side with each other. Even though I've waited for even 400 years. It's been only 2 days, Subaru. Shala, I thought just a single moment, a single glimpse would be fine." Covering her eyes, Shala immediately ceased to have her gaze slumped downwards. Seemingly, as if she were saying she regretted to have Subaru out of her field of vision for even a single moment. No, upon considering, that was indeed the case. As far back as Subaru could recall, Shala had been in the same space, at the same time with Subaru, always watching Subaru. That was not for a shallow purpose like keeping Subaru under surveillance with minimal effort, but certainly. Shala, 400 years I waited for Master Sama in the tower. I thought I would be satisfied with a single glimpse. But that wasn't the truth. Shala, Master Sama is my everything, after all. Master Sama's everything, and all of my feelings for Master Sama are what make me. The 400 years it took, I can't convey them to Master Sama. All of it in just 2 days. I can't come to terms with that. Subaru, that's why you won't tell me the 5th rule. Acute emotions enfolded the entirety of Shala's body and molded the existence known as her. 400 years, the weight of those words he had perceived through mere appearance of words, finally became an actual time frame for Subaru, and he stood at a disposition where he could feel that. After all, her attitude had been too casual to speak of 400 years. He thought that perhaps there existed no instrument in her to embrace feelings such as hardship, sadness. Perhaps she was inhuman like that scorpion, down to her very heart, down to her very soul. Shala, I don't want to talk about the rules, NG. After all, if I talk about that... Shala, if I talk about that, Master Sama will notice the way to clear the trials. That's why if I talk about that, if I end up talking about that, my time with Master Sama will end. Poignantly, Shala hugged her body and expressed her own true feelings to Subaru, as if vomiting blood no, as if restraining herself from crying. That tone of her voice stabbed through Subaru's heart. It was a reply he had not anticipated. Just as his initial question, Subaru had thought of some patterns regarding the answer to this question. The true motives behind Shala hiding the rules of Pleiades' watchtower if she had colluded with the person who created the rules of this nasty tower. She had certain plans as well, is what he thought. Otherwise, unrelated to such dark plans, the reason why she had not spoken about the rules was on a simple whim or had slipped out of her mind. And that may not hold any significance. He had thought that as well. But neither was the truth. Shala did have a reason as to why she did not want to speak of the tower's rules. And that reason was unrelated to the ideas of the sage or whoever who created the tower, but rather an earnest wish. 400 years, having lived that time in solitude, and had continued to await the reunion with the person she was waiting for, was Shala. That had come true, she had gained happiness, and that is why she wished for that time to last longer, even slightly. If it was for the sake of fulfilling that modest desire, Shala. Master Sama, will you hate me who lied to you? Shala, hating me, not even wanting to see my face. Will you be like that? For what reason was she making a face much more pain than when told something like, will you die? For what reason did she view being hated by him to be more crucial than losing her life? For what reason did she think of everything like a goal, despite waiting for 400 years? Subaru, I won't hate you or anything. Subaru, because you kept quiet, I do think I probably had to face really hard situations, and sometimes I honestly thought I'd never been cornered this badly. Facing the silent Shala, Subaru spoke his mind. There were no lies here. Those were his true feelings. Because Shala hid information as per her true intentions, Subaru had been unable to make crucial investigations and had to repeatedly face mercilessly cruel deaths. Not just Subaru. Aside from Subaru, Emilia and Beatrice had too as well. He could never forget the despair, discontentment, and hopelessness he felt during those moments. That is why, if there were to be an existence who were the originator of all of that evil, Subaru would certainly never be able to forgive them, is what he believed. Then, at this instant in front of Shala like this, was he going to do the same? Subaru? No. He did not think of Shala. She, who had lived 400 years in solitude. She, who had fulfilled the meaning of her being born in mere 2 days, and was satisfied such that she gained happiness, to be the originator of that evil. If there were to be an originator of that evil, it would be the unfairness of this world itself, and the one who created the circumstances where it was impossible to do anything about that. The Master Sama, who commanded Shala for 400 years. Shala, Suddenly a hoarse exhale leaked out of Shala's lips. Subaru, Shala, ah. Feeling abnormality in Shala's condition in front of his eyes, Subaru called out her name. However, Shala, without responding to Subaru's call, concealed her face with her palms. A painfully trembling voice unbefitting her could be heard from that throat. Shala, no good, Master Sama. Master Sama, Master Sama, Master Sama, Master Sama. Subaru, Shala, what happened? So suddenly, Shala. Somebody violated the rules. Rushing over, as Subaru jolted her white shoulders, his arms got grasped instead. And while painfully gripping to Subaru's arms with her slender ones, Shala spoke. Gazing intently into Shala's eyes, who had said that, Subaru inhaled. A queer change was occurring in the dark pupils and irises of Shala's eyes. Within her spherical eyes, the dark pupil and iris of her eyeballs split into 3, turning red and pulsating. The transfiguration which occurred in the right and left eyeballs alongside, it meant that her dark pupils and irises split into 6. 6 compound eyes, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. Shala, Master Sama, right now I can still make it. Subaru, make it. Shala, right now if Master Sama commands me, then I can still kill myself. With her eyeballs pulsating red, white steam started to arise from the entirety of Shala's body. Her white skin got engulfed with a tint of red, and even Subaru, who was standing right next to her, could feel the abnormal rise in body temperature. The principle behind it was ambiguous, just that Shala's body was generating heat and change was ensuing in it. Perhaps it was the initial phase of transforming into the form of the titanic scorpion. Shala, if I transform, I won't make it. I will become a killing machine lacking any blood or tears and kill Master Sama. I mean, I want Master Sama so much. I want Master Sama so badly that I can't bear it, that's why. Subaru. Before that happens, Shala, please tell me to die. If you do that, I will for Master Sama. We'll come to an end before killing you. Shala was unable to continue her words on to say that. In place of words, her eyes, her shivering voice, her entire body and soul were conveying the same. An incomparable dread welled up in Subaru's body as well. That was, surely, the instinctive reaction of a human faced with otherworldly fear. The human known as Natsuki Subaru was being frightened by the monster known as Shala, who was in front of him. That is why Subaru was Subaru. Shala, tell me the 5th rule. Shala, Master Sama, this is not the time for. Subaru, if you tell that to me. Subaru interrupted the words of the appealing Shala with a loud voice. At that menacing glare, Shala's shoulders shivered. He grabbed those shivering shoulders. They were warm. Such that his palm could melt, Shala's body temperature had already risen to the level of a fire. However, he did not let his hands go. Right now, he did not release her body, burning and scorching. Subaru, if you tell that to me, I'll command you. Stay calm. Before you turn into a monster, I'll command you. Hearing Subaru say that straightforwardly, Shala widened her eyes. She then called out to Subaru, saying, Master Sama, Shala, Master Sama such a womanizer? Subaru. I don't remember being one. Shala. Then Master Sama is a Shala-izer, my favorite kind of izer. Smiling weakly, Shala softly overlapped the hands grasping her shoulders with her own hands. And Shala. Fifth, it is not forbidden to destroy the trials. Shala, look, the color of my eyes has changed. At my beloved Master Sama. Saying that, Shala thrusted away Subaru's chest. At that greater-than-expected might, Subaru was thrown back, unable to keep his grip onto her shoulders. When he looked towards the front while lightly coughing, Shala, while hugging her own body, crouched down, Shala. Hick. Red steam, like the color of blood, ascended from the entirety of her body. The steam had changed its color. It was a sign of danger. Shala's eyes lost its dark pupils and irises as well, and before one could notice, turned bright red. Shala, Master Sama, hurry, before I lose myself. Shala, please tell me, to die hick. If Master Sama says that, I will. With the same mouth which had argued being against Subaru and the others completing the trials and leaving the tower, Shala, using up her life, indicated the path where she could remain without killing Subaru and the others know Subaru. Hearing that desperate voice of Shala's, Subaru inhaled. And then Subaru, Shala. Shala, Master Sama, Subaru. My bad, what I said just now was a lie. Shala, eh? At Subaru's informing words, Shala rounded her eyes. Watching Shala's reaction for himself, Subaru halted his breath and at the same pace leapt backwards. Having been pushed away, by Shala had been a blessing for him amidst all this misfortune. Had Shala kept his wrists grabbed, he would have never been able to perform this act. Subaru's body crossed over the narrow open-air veranda of the balcony and was launched into the air. Shala. Ah! Shala's instantaneous voice got engulfed in the vehement sand gusts and was rendered inaudible. At the same pace, Subaru's body, without any support, fell non-stop for several hundreds of meters. Falling down, he possessed no plans to save himself. He had not prepared any plans to save himself. What Subaru had done was purely throw himself to death. He did not desire to do this at all, nor did he want to speak of it, but this was his intention from the very beginning. If these actions could be excused, he intended to surely do this. That is because Subaru could then trust his choice without any indecision. After all, Shala. Master Sama. Similarly jumping out from the balcony herself as well, Shala chased after Subaru. Widening those eyes, desperately stretching out her hand, Shala chased the falling Subaru and leapt trying not to take away, but save that life with her own hands. The true identity of the Titanic Scorpion was Shala. Shala purposefully hid the rules of the tower. Shala had repeatedly killed Subaru or his comrades and stood in the way as the fifth obstacle. But Subaru, I just want to save you. He could never forget her form, she, who had endured her transformation against her own feelings, and had requested to be ordered to kill herself so that she does not kill Subaru, till the very end of the end. Though it was quite a nasty thing to say, he wanted to confirm that. Whom he should save, whom he should not save, whom he should defeat, whom he should protect, whom he should love. Because Natsuki Subaru believed he could not advance further unless he confirmed that. He will no longer perplex over whom he should love. Shala, Master Sama, Shala's form, while she stretched out her hand and tried pursuing Subaru, changed midair. Her hand stretching out enlarged and transformed into large pincers clad in a jet black shell. Her white skin was covered with a rough shell, without leaving any trace behind, and her flesh body expanded, as if bursting open from the interior. For a single moment, the seemingly painful transformation, as if bursting open her blood and flesh, reached conclusion as if a tape being reversed, and finally, the immense ominous incongruity the Titanic Scorpion had achieved completion. And that Titanic Scorpion's tail's tip nimbly established its aim at Subaru. Perhaps, tail stingers similar to that white luster would be fired from there, and burn Subaru's life to nothing in an instant. The midair Subaru lacked any technique to avoid that. However, Subaru, I won't let myself be killed by you because Shala would cry. The tail stinger was fired, but before that arrived the terminus of his fall. The two of Subaru and the Titanic Scorpion came falling down above the hordes of witch beasts fiercely advancing onto the sand tower. The existence known as Natsuki Subaru did not have the ability to endure the several hundred meters long fall. Bursting open, his life was shed. However, on the verge of his life being shed, he said a few final words. "Subaru, I will definitely help you." He got the meager time to convey the message to the sandy gusts, incomprehensible to the titanic scorpion.